And now to what we've been waiting for. We have an amazing panel this morning, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce these wonderful women to you. We start with Angela Downs, who is a professor of law and assistant director of experiential education at the University of North Texas, Dallas College of Law. She is a frequent trainer on cultural competency, implicit bias, and diversity issues to attorneys, judges, and school districts. Professor Downs is an associate municipal judge for the city of Glen Heights, Texas. So thank you for being here. We also have Donna Black, who we met yesterday. I mean, I'm sure you've met her before, but she presented yesterday. So I'm going to kind of skip over her bio because we know her and love her. And then we also have Josette Saxton. She is the Director of Mental Health Policy at Texans Care for Children, a statewide nonprofit, nonpartisan, multi-issue children's policy organization. She has a BA in psychology from West Chester University and a master's in social work from the University of Texas at Austin. We also have Amy Baker, who, you know, if you work in schools, Amy Baker would have been your best friend because she is administration, right? She received a bachelor's degree in curriculum and instruction from Texas A&M. Whoop, go Aggies. I had to do that because I'm an Aggie. A master's degree from UT San Antonio in educational leadership. And she holds a superintendent certification. So she has 19 years of experience in Frisco ISD and Alamo Heights ISD as a classroom teacher, instructional coach, and campus administrator. So welcome. We also have Ann Liu. She is a prevention and intervention services coordinator for Louisville ISD. Big shout out to Louisville. She works with the district, student assistance counselors, social workers, and campus counselors. She believes in the power of social emotional learning and knows the impact it can have on students' lives. She received her BS in home economics education from Texas Tech University and her MED in educational psychology from Texas A&M University, another Aggie. And she has been a PSC for over 25 years, so welcome. Sharon Bradley currently serves as a director of Family and Social Services in the SEL department for Plano ISD, where she has helped shape the district's approach to social and emotional development for all students. She has been in education for 19 years, so she brings a lot of experience. And in her current role, she designs and facilitates adult SEL professional learning experiences to build capacity and advocates for SEL for all students across the state of Texas. And last but not least, we have Rachelle Finck, who currently serves as coordinator for SEL for Round Rock. So out of this group, I think she's the furthest south, right? Still not south enough. We should be at the beach, remember. She has a BA in secondary education and mathematics from Manchester University and an MA in professional counseling from Texas State University. In her work, she has worked to develop a framework to better guide SEL systems. So please join me in welcoming this amazing panel who is going to teach us a whole lot about equity solutions through SEL. So I'm going to hand it over to Angela, who's going to be our moderator for this session. Thank you so much. Welcome.
All right. Well, thank you, Nancy, and to TASP for this very kind invitation for us to be with you today. And I think it's really appropriate that we're here with you today on Juneteenth. In Juneteenth, as Nancy shared with you, is the day that enslaved Africans in Texas learned that they were free. And this came 2.5 years after the end of the Civil War. So it is a time for celebration, but it's also a time for reflection. And so a lot of our conversation that we have with you this morning is going to be based on having you do self-reflection and really looking inward onto your systems, how you interact, the relationships that you have, because I know the goal for all of us in our interactions with our school districts, with our children, with the parents, is to be the best that we can be for them. So really want to thank you for having us here today. We've got a lot to talk about, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on background information. But as we began working on this presentation, we were initially focused on the impact of COVID-19 and SEL. And then Ahmaud Arbery happened. He was killed. Then Breonna Taylor was killed. And then George Floyd was killed. And folks took to the streets. They started marching and protesting and really demanding a change. And then last week, Rayshard Brooks was killed. We know the climate is shifting. Folks are taking to the streets, they're demanding change. And this shift is going to affect our children as they return to our schools. So not only are they going to be dealing with the impact of COVID-19, sheltering in place, all of the dynamics that come into play with a parent who may or may not be employed, but they're also going to be dealing with the changing climate of how we're dealing with issues of equity, inclusion, and cultural responsiveness. And you've got to be ready for that challenge. So I'm going to kick off our discussion with Donna. How do we frame our conversation in our response with the shifting messages and the things that are happening in the world as it relates to social emotional learning?
Well, Angela, thank you for that question. I think I was really reflecting on yesterday's questions that came in after I did the 1.5-hour workshop. And it occurred to me that one of the things that we really have to be cognizant of as we're working to bring these youngsters back and help them deal with everything that they've been going through for the last 3-4 months or more, we have to be cognizant of their experiences, their own personal experiences. I think that when SEL is perceived as a program, that's problematic. SEL isn't a program, it really is a process. And the process involves all of the different components of our educational system. And it's about helping children learn through different domains. They don't just learn through the cognitive domain, as we said yesterday. They learn through multiple domains. They learn through the social domain. They learn through the emotional domain, but they also learn through the cultural domains, what they've experienced in their own cultures. And when we think of cultures as school psychologists, we often think of culture as an ethnicity issue. And it's more than that. That's the big umbrella piece of our culture, but there are subcultures that we also have to be cognizant of. There are things like how I have formed my own identity through my own experiences. That could be through my own family culture, my own group culture, my own gender culture. Many things serve to form our own identity, and that culture is brought with us when we come into the school setting. So when we're thinking of social and emotional learning and how we're preparing to serve these youngsters in that process, we have to be cognizant of these differences and the diversity that they bring in. So SEL has to be done through an equity lens.
And Donna, I think it's important that you're saying that and reiterating that social emotional learning is not a program, that it's an integrative process tied to the instruction and other aspects of that young person's life. I think that's a key point that you've highlighted. So as we are looking to shift back into the classroom, Sharon, I'm going to bring you into the conversation. How are districts preparing for the challenges ahead, especially since TEA may be more focused on academic deficits?
Well, thank you, Angela. As we know, school districts all over the state are preparing for various scenarios for the upcoming school year, whether we're together physically, virtually, or a combination of both. I think it's very important that we as school districts take heed to the lessons learned during last school years of remote learning. Prioritizing the students' physical safety, prioritizing the students and staff mental and emotional and psychological safety, is very important, while also making sure that we have the supports in place to help our students achieve academic success. But it's also important for our districts to be mindful of the shared trauma that we all have experienced and we are currently experiencing at the time. I mean, literally our lives have been turned upside down overnight. And for our adults in the building, it's very important for us to be equipped to help prepare our students and staff recover, and to reestablish positive trust and relationships upon reentry. And then also at the same time, help our students and staff deal with the stress, anxiety, anxiousness of the 3 possible fears. And that is the first one, the fear of contracting the virus, the fear of falling even further academically behind. But then the third fear, and this is, for our teachers and staff, what are we prepared to combat, to intervene when social injustice and racial issues appear in the classroom or in the school? So building staff capacity is key in culture responsive practices, trauma informed practices. And as Angela, you said earlier, reflecting, looking inward and making sure that we are in the best place in order to support our kiddos, no matter how they enter our virtual and physical spaces for the upcoming school year.
Okay, thank you, Sharon, for that. And something that you said has really going to lead me to another question for you. When we think about going back into school, we think of being in a physical building. And I know a lot of schools don't really know what that's going to look like. They don't know if it's going to be the standard, everyone comes in for a normal, quote, type day, or if it's going to be a hybrid model. How can we start thinking about that from kind of a standpoint of providing trauma-informed care, being sensitive? How do we start thinking about those things?
Well, as I said earlier, it's so important. I know after spring break or after March, we felt as if we were kind of thrown into a situation, but honestly, it forced all of us to be more innovative, more creative, more purposeful in how we connect with students, how we connect with our colleagues. But since we have all experienced what we have experienced from March to May, taking a look at what works for students, what are the needs of our families, from the digital divide to food insecurity to all the different disparities and inequities that have been magnified throughout this whole situation, taking notes and taking heed. And then one thing we realize is that we can't do this alone. So having that community of care, food pantries, being a part of different organizations providing Wi-Fi to make sure that everyone has access, I think is truly going to literally take a village and take the community with the input and feedback from families and contributions from the families and everyone involved.
Thank you. Thank you. That was an extremely thoughtful response. Thank you, Sharon, for that. Amy, I'm going to bring you into the conversation just with this next question. thinking about challenges to reunification in the schools. Can you talk a little bit about any challenges that you can identify?
Well, just about every aspect of coming back into the school right now is a challenge for every principal and administrator in every district. You know, I think we talked a lot about making sure that we are meeting those needs of our students, but I think identifying the needs of our students is going to look different than maybe it has in the past. And Sharon, you mentioned it before, it's building that capacity in our staff. So how do we teach our staff to recognize concerns for students when you have possibly some students in the classroom and some students are fully participating at home? How do we ensure that we are assessing and providing that instruction and meeting the emotional needs of those students equitably? That is a huge challenge. Mostly too, our teachers are going to have to teach in ways they've never done before. And so I think at all levels of district participation, LSSPs, school counselors, their roles are going to have to look even a little bit different because the needs are going to be so much more different.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I love the talk of that both you and Sharon have highlighted with relationships and really kind of looking at things with a broader lens. I think that's going to be really key. So Anne and Rachelle, you know, we've talked about kind of the self-care, and really we know that we're all going to be coming back to school with some form of trauma. And it's going to be important to look and take care of ourselves and others around us. How can we do that? How can we take care of what we're calling the big people first in order to be able to do what we need to do? And either one of y'all can jump on that one.
When we talk about SEL, most of the time we automatically think, how does this apply to students, right? We automatically go there first because it's comfortable. It's comfortable for me to talk about kiddos. It's comfortable for me not to focus on me, right? Like I can talk about kids all day long. But in order to do that and to purposefully serve kids, I have to serve myself first. And it's hard. I often think of, you know, like Sharon mentioned this idea of shared trauma. Teachers' lives stopped on a dime in some cases. I got lots of information from teachers when they went back to their classroom to close out the year, and the last date said March 12th, and it's May 15th, and they haven't been in their room. It's almost like they went back in time. Yeah. And so if we want teachers to have these skills and to be able to have this conversation with kids, they need to have these skills too. Often it gives them a language that they can then draw back on, and they can then go and I can integrate it more easily throughout the day if I have those skills in my toolbox. The same thing applies with instruction, right? If I'm really good at guided reading, I can find places to make that happen outside of my reader's workshop. The same thing happens with SEL. If I have those skills outside of that time that I'm teaching a skill, I can then apply it in the library. I can then apply it in other cases. If there's a conflict in the classroom, I can immediately jump in and do something. But they're also individuals and they're also people, and we have to give them skills so that they can enjoy their job. Like, we want people to enjoy their job while they're at school. We will keep them, we will retain teachers a lot better if they feel like they are supported and their emotional well-being is taken care of. So I'm going to let Anne jump in.
Okay, Anne, thanks. Thank you, Rachelle.
Well, and I think something that we've discussed along the way is intentionally equipping our staff with these skills and helping them recognize when they need to step away and take a break. And I think that's where we as mental health professionals in our school building need to have very intentional conversations with, you know, what are you doing to take care of yourself? And keep putting that in the forefront of staff members' minds. Intentional conversations with our leadership in our buildings of, you know, what are you doing to encourage your staff to take care of yourselves? I know I personally struggled quite a bit in our new environment with shutting down at the end of the day. You know, all of a sudden, my house was my office, and that's a really huge transition. And I had to take a lot of steps back, and my boss had a lot of conversations with us about, you know, turn your laptop off, do some things. So I think that's going to be a huge thing for us in the fall as mental health professionals in our buildings, of continually bringing that forward and giving suggestions and giving help and support to not only the kids, but the adults in the building, because they're going to need it just as much as the kids.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Rachelle.
I think Anne also brings up a really good point in that we as mental health professionals have to give permission to our principals that they can take this time and they can model this, right? Because we are going to be so pushed to the COVID slide, and kids have not been in school for so long, and automatically jump to academics. When we know that, we just have to have this permission to say, I need this time and I need to model this for my staff, and set that culture within the building.
Okay. All right. Donna, after Donna, I've got a question that I do want to read from one of our folks out in the audience. Donna, yeah.
I just wanted to chime in because I think it's really important for us to also be aware that we should not assume, when Rachelle talked about that these adults need to have these skills themselves, we should not assume that they have these skills. And they may need to be taught these skills as well through some professional development.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in an ideal world, everyone would know and would do. I think that's a great point, Donna. But to get folks kind of in the mindset, and that helps with getting everyone kind of on board, is for everyone to go through and really understand the importance of social emotional learning. So that's a really wonderful point. Okay, I'm going to turn our attention. We have a question from Arthur. His question is, what is the role of cultural responsiveness? Can teachers and school psychologists effectively and ethically implement SEL unless they know about and appreciate cultures which are other than their own? So I'm going to throw that out there, and whomever wants to respond may. Donna.
Take that. Dr. Hernandez, thank you very much for that question. That's what I was alluding to with my opening remarks, that we can't assume that every child's ethnicity or cultural difference is the same. Every one of our interactions with children will be based on their own personal identity and their own personal experiences. So our ability to respond and be responsive to these individuals means that we have to be cognizant again and aware of these cultural differences, whether it's an ethnically cultural difference or just a difference between, it's a sexual orientation difference. There are many different types of cultures that we have to be aware of when children come into the school setting. We all have established our own personal identity through our own personal experiences, through those personal cultures. So being responsive to that will require us to have some discussions. We have to openly talk about some of these differences.
I think that's a good point. You do need to talk about things, and we've got to, I'm just going to be frank, we're going to have to stop tiptoeing around and really just have the conversations and stop framing it in, that it's a hard conversation. It's a conversation that's long overdue, and we need to have it for our children. We really do. And we need to look at things also. When we're looking at cultural responsiveness, we need to be looking inward. We need to look to do those self-checks. How are we responding when we come in contact with students who are different, that have a different ethnicity, a different culture? What are we doing? Have we worked on our own biases? Because I think that a lot of times that can frame how we interact with students. So we really need to take a good hard look at those things so that we can be better and have those tools. So Josette, I saw your hand up. I'm gonna actually let you have the next word.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to add that too. And then even in terms of looking at it through, like being culturally responsive is not only recognizing the difference, like you said, like Donna was saying, there's differences and diversity, you know, in the students who are coming into school, in the staff, in the families, but then also, like you said, Angela, it's also looking inward. And I think the way we might sort of define different as in something other than ourselves, with ourself as the almost like the starting point or the norm. So as part of this conversation, I think it's really important to not look at it as something that is being done to the students or for the students, but it really is. It's like, how are we approaching our relationships, our interactions, and doing that work to think what are our own implicit biases. And so much about it's like trying to understand the differences of, you know, students, is be like, well, what's different about us? So that's it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Josette, for that. Before we move on, we have another question from Arthur. Can SEL objectives and outcomes for assessment and integration into instruction and other be ethically identified without the participation of the community of parents and children? So I'm going to throw that out there for whomever wants to answer.
What was that question? Let me see.
I'll read it again. Can SEL objectives and outcomes for assessment and integration into instruction be ethically identified without the participation of the community of parents and children? Yeah, Amy.
So that is such a great question, and I really appreciate that. At the school, and actually I just retired on Monday, so for the record, I'm not quite still a principal, but I'm a few days out. So,
and Amy, congratulations! We all hope to be just like you someday.
Thank you. I'm living the dream. So anyway.
You are.
But so, for example, the school that I was a principal at, it was an elementary school, K through 5, about 760 students. But of those 760 students,
oh dear.
We do want to look at it from a broader perspective besides just languages and ethnicity, but that is the reason why we can't approach SEL and all kinds of things without including our parents and community. There is no way that me, as the principal of that particular school, can be the expert in 18 different cultures, just those identified. So I do believe, and Angela, it's like you said, I think it starts with lots and lots of conversations that we can't shy away from, and we have to welcome them and just continue to have lots and lots of conversations, and those goals will get reached. Those goals will definitely get reached.
Okay, yeah, Rachelle.
And I think, Amy brings up a really great point. Like, it's easy for me to sit in central office and create the frameworks and create the objectives and create all of the things that need to be in place. But if I really want buy-in and I really want this to flourish and be sustainable within my community, I have to draw in my community, my parents, my teachers, my counselors, all stakeholders to who this really affects, which is everyone. They need to have a voice and a seat at the table. And so I might do that through community forums and parent engagement nights, but I also might do it through surveys or just having conversations on campuses. We have an opportunity here to really bring in voices that aren't usually heard and don't have a space in the world.
And Rachelle, I think you bring up a good point. Obviously, we want the community, and I think we should broaden the community to be not only our teachers, our administrators, but I think we need to look at staff, the folks that work in the cafeteria, this crossing guard, those folks that have interaction and touches with our young people, because they have a very important role in SEL and can really help us spread the message because they have those touches as well. I'm going to get to Sharon and then Donna, and then we're going to move on to our next topic. I love that this is a great conversation. All right, Sharon.
I love this question because, as you say, it's very important for all of us to speak the same language for the benefit of the children. And again, we have to get rid of assumptions. The things that we teach in the classroom, we want our community and our parents to reinforce in the home and the community. But we cannot assume that these SEL skills are not being taught at home and in the community. And we want to make sure we're speaking the same language to reinforce on the buses for our bus drivers, like you say, crossing guards, the fans department, and so forth. So awesome question.
Okay, Donna.
Just wanted to add, these are wonderful conversations and I love the contributions everyone's making, but when we're thinking about the perspective of the parent and the perspective of the community, don't forget the perspective of the student. Include that student in your discussions, in your committees. We encourage every school to have student representation on the SEL committees because those voices are very important as well.
That is a wonderful point, because you definitely want to provide something for students that is what they want and not what we think they want. So I think that's a really, really great point. Thank you, Donna. So I'm going to turn our topic here a little bit. We're going to talk about the disproportionality in the juvenile justice system. As an associate municipal court judge and lawyer and law professor, this is something that's near and dear to my heart, and it's a big part of my practice and what I do. The research from Texas Appleseed, the 2019 Dallas County report looking at systems and other statistics are clear. Hispanic and Black children are disciplined at a higher rate, and they find themselves in the school to prison pipeline. One thing to note, that the fastest rate of discipline and a growing trend that we're seeing in school discipline is Black girls. And I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to read and to view the documentary Push Out, which really focuses on the criminalization of Black girls. There's also another book, Sing a Rhythm, Dance of Blues, The Education and Liberation of Black and Brown Girls. That's another kind of focus on this group, but that's the fastest growing trend. So I want to kick it off with Sharon for this discussion topic, but what are some SEL strategies your district has implemented to address disproportionality, specifically with regard to discipline?
Thank you so very much. Leveraging the data, I mean, as we look at our data and leveraging that data for continuous improvement, what does the data show? I mean, are most of the infractions willful defiance, you know, whatever it is. And do we have tools in our toolbox outside of your normal traditional measures in order to support the needs of students? We're all on a different, in a different space from this journey from being zero tolerance to being more restorative. And it all starts with the mindset. I love when you said, Angela, you know, looking inward, you know, taking a deeper look as to what our practices look like and our procedures. But until we shift our thinking, then our practices will not change. And if we shift our thinking, we shift our practices, then that is when we're going to get different results. So one of the strategies that we've been doing in Plano ISD is monthly, we have what we call these collaborative student management meetings. We have an administrator from each campus, and we focus on building the capacity of the administrators on more restorative tools, you know, like restorative practices, you know, focusing on that mindset, like coming up with reflective activities, like should I suspend a student for a behavior deficit or skill that I hadn't even taught them? just because the kid is in 6th grade or 9th grade, we cannot assume that these skills have been taught prior to this point. So what are we doing to be more intentional about teaching the skills and modeling the skills that we would like to see? You can't teach a kid self-management skills if we're not modeling it within our everyday interactions with our students. And then equipping adults with the tools and strategies of the MTSS model, you know, the tiered interventions. Do we have our universal tiers in check? What do those tier 2 targeted interventions look like, and those more intensive strategies? And of course, de-escalation strategies, because when things get to a certain point, do we as a community, do we as a school community have the skills needed in order to de-escalate or to prevent a situation from taking it to the next level?
I think that is key, the de-escalation. Sharon, thank you for sharing that. You know, one of the things, part of my role at the law school is to help oversee our clinical programs. And we have really made it really one of our charges to work on juvenile cases. And we're working on juvenile Class C ticket cases. And we were finding with these cases that it was tracking the statistics that the clients that we were serving with these cases were majority Hispanic and Black. But we were finding that we've had school districts that were filing cases with the police and having police intervention instead of using de-escalation, even though it was not to be done. The legislature actually changed the truancy and how school districts are to handle cases that happen on their school campuses, or to handle them on campus. So really going back and really shining a light on that is changing. Just in our small little effort at our law school, that schools have really taken a good hard look to realize that they're not to file those cases, and they're implementing those strategies and really looking at ways to improve their process. So hopefully that's one small thing that we've done to kind of bring about a change.
And in order for de-escalation strategies to truly be effective, the relationship has to be there.
Yes.
And I know that relationships has kind of turned into a trendy word, but we treat each other differently when we know more about each other. So focusing on more proactive measures as opposed to spending your focus a lot on reacting to reoccurring behaviors, although it takes time, it's very imperative.
Yeah, and peeling back the layers a lot of times, just kind of, as you said, not reacting, but really seeing if you can get to the root of what's going on with the child can be really helpful. So I'm going to bring Anne into the conversation. Love to get your thoughts about some SEL strategies that your district has implemented in order to address disproportionality.
I want to address something Sharon said. She talked about that we have to change the lens. And a conversation that we have been having for the last year and keep having is asking administrators and teachers to look at, is the behavior willful and defiant, or is it a skill deficit, or is it a result of trauma? And when you ask them to step back, it's really interesting to see the light bulbs go off for all the adults. And they're like, oh, wow, we've never talked about self-management. We've never talked about responsible decision-making. And so we've been educating them on intentionally having those conversations, using the relationships they have with those kids who struggle in those areas, having the conversations when it's not an issue, finding the opportunities to take the time with those kids. And as you said, it does take time, but it's a proactive strategy. Our district has been really implementing very intentionally restorative practices, and then coming along beside it, my department has been really launching some SEL programs school-wide and having those conversations we mentioned earlier with cafeteria services, with custodial services. I was fortunate enough to train all of those people, including transportation, on what SEL is. And I have monthly things that I send out to those departments and conversations with those departments so that their staff is aware. Here's the SEL skill that you're going to see talked about in classrooms this month. Here's how you can support our kiddos this month, so that it is community. It is, kids are getting micro learning from every person that they come in contact in our system. And so I think those things are hugely important for the kids to understand all of these skills and how it impacts them and how they can use them.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Anne. Donna, I'm going to get to you. Yeah, Donna.
Okay. I just wanted to add to something because Anne,
Absolutely.
she brought up such a good point, and what she was talking about is this asset-driven approach, that we should not view these youngsters as damaged and needing repairing. We need to be looking, and especially for these LSSPs, we're talking to an LSSP audience today, and they deal with youngsters who are disabled, who have disabilities, who are at risk already. And so when we take the approach that we've traditionally taken with these youngsters, that they are damaged, that there's something pathologically wrong with them and we've got to fix it, then we really don't focus on what they bring to the table. What kind of skills do they already have, and how can we build upon those skills? What Anne was talking about is what we need to be doing in special education with our youngsters. We need to be talking to them about the skills they already have. When we're talking about responsible decision making, or when we're talking about self-awareness, and we need to be telling them, you do have the ability to recognize your own emotions, to understand, when you need to have self-confidence. Those are the skills that we're trying to build in them, but they never get told that they already have some of these skills.
Thanks, Donna.
Important.
And I love that Anne, that you talked about micro-learning opportunities for kids. I think that is a wonderful strategy. So thank you for sharing that. And Donna, thank you for your remarks as well. So I'm going to bring Rachelle into the conversation. Rachelle, kind of the same question. What has Round Rock done to really look at this issue?
We've done a couple of things, and we're also launching a couple of things in the fall that I think are tying in also to what Anne and Sharon have already talked about. But at the very beginning, we heard Donna say that this cannot just be a program at one point. We have a universal curriculum that happens throughout our entire pre-K through 8th grade students, but that's not the only time they are exposed to skills and conversations. And so bringing in other staff throughout our campuses reiterates that conversation. So for example, I've trained all of our librarians on de-escalation strategies, how to start a conversation with the kid, because we know that oftentimes the library is a place of refuge for a lot of our students, specifically at secondary, which is a place where this can be a really hard conversation. So bringing those kind of, I don't want to say they're in the apron for my former theater people, but they're in the apron and they're waiting and they want these skills, but they don't know how to have that conversation. So finding ways to pull them in. But then it's also not being afraid to look at your data, even when it's really ugly. Like Round Rock, I will be the first person to admit, TEA puts out a list every year of districts with hyper disproportionality. Round Rock has been on that list for over 10 years, which tells us what we're doing isn't working. So how are we gonna fix it? And for us, it's been having those conversations around restorative practices and around getting ahead of what's happening. We can't wait for the behavior to occur, because at that point, it's too late. How do we proactively pre-teach? How do we give teachers skills and the permission to effectively build relationships? One of the biggest things we are launching in the fall, kind of going with Sharon's conversation around MTSS, is we're really giving teachers and our student support teams more guidance for how to look at kids holistically. We do a really great job talking about kids and their academics, but when it comes to behavior, it's either they're behaving or they're out. And that's not working. It's not teaching anything. It's not giving kids an opportunity to figure out what's underneath the behavior, because we know behavior is communication. So how do we really look at, I love what Anne, I'm taking notes for myself. Like, I love the 3 things that Anne wrote down. Like, is this willful and defiant? Is it a skill deficit? And have we taught it? Or is this trauma? And do we need to look at we are lucky enough to have behavior interventionists in our campuses. Is this something they can teach in a small group, or is this something I need to look at a mental health referral? Because those are handled very differently by very different groups. But oftentimes it's like, nope, just get them in a check-in, check-out and call it a day. When we can do a lot more effective work and spend less time, if it's a small group with a counselor or it's a referral to an outside source. So really looking at what's the underlying cause and how do we then, I don't want to say fix because it's not fixing kids, but really help give kids the skills that they need and the teachers need. Because oftentimes when we see behaviors, it's not a kid issue, it's a teacher relationship issue.
And what I'm hearing, from what I'm hearing from this conversation, it's providing the skills, and then it's taking the step back. Mm-hmm. It's taking a step back. It's taking the breath, and really doing what we've said we want to do is the self-reflection.
Well, and I think going back to that staff SEL piece, this is where their skills become so important as well, because then they know I'm escalated. I need to take a step back, right, instead of pushing the button, because the more I push and the more I ask questions, I'm just highly escalating that kid and pushing them to a place where they might have a referral or they might have something where they need removal from the classroom so that they can take a break. But if I, as the adult, know that and can see that sooner, I can handle that in my classroom. And then I'm also modeling for kids what it looks like to say, hey, you know what? I messed up. I need to take a break.
Yeah. All right, well, we have a question from Manny that I'm going to read. In regard to your discussion about MTSS, do you have any recommendations to help identify students needing small group behavior / SEL supports? At times, oh goodness, let's move in here. At times, office discipline referrals and teacher referrals seem reactive and only capture certain students. So any recommendations to help identify students needing small group behavior / SEL supports?
I think broadening, not just looking at discipline referrals, looking at attendance rates, looking at grades, and really looking at the whole picture would help identify some more kids. You can't just look at the one who's acting out and getting office referrals for discipline. You could have a kid needing SEL supports because they're having severe anxiety, and so their coping skill is to stay home and not attend school. That kid may not, if you're only looking at discipline referrals, may not get referred because they're not the squeaky wheel. So I think really just broadening what you look at.
Okay, Sharon, yes.
I totally agree with Ann. Just because a student is not overtly acting out or hadn't racked up several referrals does not necessarily mean that they do not need SEL support, lessons or guidance. I mean, think of your high achieving students, your AP, your IB student. Just because they have a high IQ does not necessarily mean that they have a high EQ. And the social issues and the internal anxiety and anxiousness that takes place within inside, and they may quote unquote fall under the radar. That's why universal SEL is so important, so that all kids get the support and all kids receive support in these skills that are so essential for life effectiveness.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. It's true. And I love that just your comment that the child might be high achieving and having high IQ, but not a high EQ. I think that's a great point. Thank you for that. Amy, you wanted to?
And I think when I look at that question, and it's such a great question, the great place to intervene for that is before the referrals are even made. And so I just want to share that as an LSSP, please do not underestimate your influence on a campus principal or on campus teachers. And what I would just encourage you to do, you guys are the experts. You guys are the subject matter expert. And I know a lot of LSSPs are overwhelmed with evaluations, and you may sometimes feel like that's what you seem to be doing the most of. But when you have those opportunities to speak to a principal or to speak to an administrator or just even a teacher and say, so how's it going in your classroom? Yeah, do you have any issues going on? It may not even be a child that's on your radar, but I think that place to intervene is in those conversations when there aren't issues, to help build that capacity and change the thinking pattern. Most of those referrals, I'm imagine, that come from teachers and administrators is because they just don't know what else to do. And they don't have any other strategies in their toolbox, or they're feeling a lot of pressure for that academic gap that they think that the intervention is going to take too much time away from that academics. They don't see how it all works together. So please, please, please just have lots and lots and lots of conversations with your campuses.
Great, thank you. I love the communication piece. Amy, you can't go wrong if you're talking to each other. So another question from Connie. Can someone speak to a successful continuation with consistency, fidelity of SEL's implementation in a district that experiences a high rate of turnover with administrators and teachers? This tends to be the biggest barrier in our area of Texas.
So we have some really high rate of turnover in certain pockets of our district. Some of our districts, or some campuses in our district, have been in place as it is for a number of years. And other districts, it seems like there's just this rolling door. And so one of my big jobs is every time a new principal is named, I am immediately having conversations with him. What's your vision? Here's what's been happening. How do we either continue, or every principal kind of wants to put their own spin on it. So how can we continue this floor, as I call it, like this is the minimum, what can you layer on top of it? And we talk through all of that. And then also having every year, they have PD for their staff. We do it as part of new teacher orientation. We do it as we also have our first year teacher academy, where we are teaching teachers the minute they walk in the door, because we know that these skills are not being taught in teacher prep programs. They're just not. We're working on it, but it's not in a place yet that that's the case. So the minute they walk in the door, we're giving them the tools that they need. And that continues throughout the year. But also for our new to the district teachers, even if you've taught in Round Rock before, but you come back, you still attend new teacher orientation. And then I get in front of them and give them some platforms. And continuing that conversation. It's not just an August conversation, it's an August through May conversation. And so I think just being really proactive of like my number one role is to make sure as rollover happens and as turnover happens, because we know it's going to, how do we keep that conversation going so that it doesn't die, for lack of a better word, in the groundwater because no one's tending to it, or they didn't know that they had a really great system in place when a principal leaves.
I love it. It's the education piece and keeping that the kind of the conversations open and continuous. Donna, you wanted to speak?
Another thing that Round Rock has done, and Rachelle, you can speak more to this, is that in Round Rock, SEL is part of their district strategic plan. So that makes a big difference when a new principal steps on campus. That's already a mandate from the district level. So Rachelle, you might want to elaborate a little bit more on that.
That's right. I forget that it is, I think, because it's been there for a couple of years. But yes, when we redid our strategic plan, it's woven throughout a lot of our district goals, but goal 5 specifically says we will foster students and their social emotional well-being. So it's explicitly stated. Now, what that looks like for campuses may look a little bit different, but again, we have that floor where we say we have a universal curriculum. We've done an implementation model where we are currently at all but 4 of our 34 elementary schools, and all of our middle schools are implementing that curriculum. For next year, we will be at 34 elementary schools and 11 middle schools. So we will be at 100%. And then we have that conversation at high school, but it's more of an integrative approach. But every campus has to identify a campus goal around goal 5. So they have to be thinking about social emotional learning and what that impact has on its campus in their campus improvement plan. And then I review all the campus improvement plans and then support teachers and principals as they go throughout their journey throughout the year. It's a lot of work on my end to read 55 campus improvement plans, but it gives me the data and the tools that I need to say, I know Void Elementary is working on X, Y, and Z. Here are the resources I can help plug in for them. Or here's a tool that I can give to its principal to then roll out throughout the year. And it just gives me a starting place where I know this is their goal. How do I help them do it? And how do I help them do it effectively so that it doesn't just kind of fall off the radar like some things can happen?
I love that approach, Rachelle, because as you know, if folks have challenges, then you're there to really help and stand in the gap and to bring them along. And it's as though your district is really trying to speak with one voice on the issue. Have you seen a difference since you've implemented that into your strategic plan?
Yes, I would say a couple things have happened. So at the same time that happened my second year in the district, and I'm fortunate enough to now have been in here for 5 years. So now, before, I was brand new to the district and I was a brand new position. So not many people knew who Rachelle Finck was. I'd send you an email and you'd go like, isn't this the CKH lady? Where now they realize that we've shifted to more of the whole picture and that holistic view. Where I'm not here to check a box. I'm not here to walk your campus with a clipboard and, check how many students you're calling on. I'm truly here as a resource to help you achieve your goals. That also means I'm going to ask you some really tough questions. And so principals will just call on it and bounce an idea off me at this point. I spent a lot of time developing those relationships so that when conversations needed to happen that weren't so nice, we could talk about that. When we were talking about disproportionality, I have, like Sharon said, I have to have a relationship with you before I talk about the disproportionality of your campus. Otherwise, I'm just the bad guy. When really I want to have a conversation and figure out how we can work together to serve your students and to serve your staff. And that's been the biggest piece, is I had to spend the time to build a relationship. And it took some time.
Yeah. Well, how do you, I'm going to ask Ann to really get us started with this discussion. How do you make that shift in terms of climate and culture to really be more proactive, to use a more proactive approach instead of a reactive approach?
That's a real uphill battle. And I think it begins with leadership and speaking their language, and their language is data, and really showing what SEL can do for a campus and what it can do for the kids and what it can do for the staff. I think that once you can get leadership to buy in, I was very fortunate this year. We were relaunching our SEL program in our district, and I had 8 campuses that I was working with of my 40 elementary campuses. I had one particular principal who she was a former school counselor, so she gets it. She understands the importance. She understands what it does. And she really bought into, I call it, she's my all-in program. She jumped all in, no hesitation. This is my vision. This is the program we're doing. This is how you will implement it. Their SEL program, it was really amazing. They had every adult in the building in a classroom teaching the SEL skill. The only 2 adults that weren't in a classroom teaching an SEL skill were in the front office so that they could greet students, answer phones. But cafeteria services, the nurse, the librarian, any specials teacher, they were all in classrooms working on the SEL skill. And this was really because of her vision and her mandate of we're making this important. And she had pushback from staff at the beginning, but I will say 2 or 3 weeks into it, they were 100% on board and asking for more and how we could do more. And it was really interesting, the anecdotal data that we got from this particular campus of the kids went on a field trip, and the place where they went on the field trip actually called the campus after the field trip and said, hey, I don't know what's different about your kids this year. Your kids have been coming for over 15 years, but there was something different about your kids this year. And for that principal to be able to share that with the other elementary principals, I had principals calling me before I could even say, hey, I'm opening up for more campuses to really implement our SEL program with some fidelity and some intentionality next year. They were calling me before I even called them. So I think, finding your person who believes in SEL outside of our circle and really has the vision and intentionality to implement it, I think is going to be hugely helpful.
So I'm hearing buy-in from those that are kind of not in the true believer circle that I see myself with right now.
Yes.
Is critically important. And can you share, I know you had some, you were able to get some additional staff to help. Can you talk about that? How were you able to do that? You know, we know budgets are going to be challenging for school districts, but I'd love for you to share that so that others might hear what you did.
Well, I think, you know, as a mental health professional, people outside of our circle don't really understand what we do. You know, they think that you're in your office playing games or, you know, chit-chatting, and they don't really fully understand the full picture of what social emotional learning can do, what mental health interventions can do. And so a few years ago, our district our campus counselors started collecting data. And you'll have to forgive me, I don't remember the exact date range, but within just a few months, we presented the data to our school board, and they were like, how many visits, you know, how much time do your campus counselors spend? And we broke the data down for them on, you know, we were dealing with anxiety, we were dealing with skill building, whatever the topics were. And they were just blown away by what we were able to do in the short amount of time. And it really delineated out for them, we're not just playing games with kids. We're not just having, you know, conversations off just because it's fun. We are doing some really great interventions. And our district added our student assistance counselor team because of that. And it really also helped protect our campus counselors with our student ratio to keep that down as well. So it was really an amazing just to watch it all unfold.
That's great. That is fantastic. Thank you for that. So we've got some other questions, and I'm going to try to get to as many as I can, but some of them are just really great. So when building sustainability, this is one that is an anonymous attendee, so I don't have a name on this one. When building sustainability and working with staff members to incorporate SEL, how can we help make changes when administrators have not made it a priority? So this goes back to buy-in. How can we provide some insight? What have folks done that may have found themselves in a similar circumstance? Sharon, could you provide some insight?
Well, that is an awesome question. And especially when I began to really start in this role and work with campuses, buy-in is a big deal. Helping principals see the priority and communicate how this should be prioritized on their campus was a big deal. So one of the things that helped me help others was to lift up what they're already doing that aligns with SEL. So it was making sure, number one, they had a clear, concise understanding of the 5 competencies. And once they had a good understanding of the 5 competencies, I would say, you know, well, tell me some of the things that you're doing, you know, to support kiddos. And I will help, during that conversation, align the things they're already doing to the 5 competencies. So I say, you know what, this is nothing new. You're already doing SEL before there was a name to it. So how do we now lift up the skills that we would like to see within the kids, communicate that to the staff, and also, you know, so that they can communicate that to the kids. And then, of course, I told them that this is not going to work unless your staff knows that you believe that this is a priority. So what does that look like? What are you doing in your existing structures to support SEL, whether it's through your staff meetings or your collaborative team meetings or your campus improvement plans and things like that? Because once your staff knows that the leadership prioritizes this and believes in this and understands this, then they will begin to come around. And then the second thing was taking administrators through meaningful learning experiences themselves. So there can be some things that can be lifted up within them, because we're educators. Once we have an aha moment, guess what? We want to share that and for others to have that aha moment. So I guess my answer is making sure there's a deep understanding of the 5 competencies, lifting up the things they're already doing that aligns with the competencies, and talking about the importance of communicating the prioritization, and taking them through ongoing meaningful experiences, reflective, meaningful experiences themselves.
I love it. That's a great insight. Thank you, Sharon. Had some really effective strategies. Josette, I'd love for you to join the conversation and to comment.
Yeah, no, I was thinking what might help too in trying to get the buy-in from campus leaders is pointing to how these strategies can help them sort of comply with some of the legislation that was passed last year by our Texas legislator related to student mental health and safe and supportive schools. So part of one of the bills that will go into effect for this upcoming school year are school districts are required to have plans and procedures in place related to things like creating positive and supportive school climates, building social and emotional skills related to managing emotions, although not healthy relationships, but relationship skills and responsible decision making. They need to have plans and procedures in place related to mental health intervention and referrals. So these are things that districts are required to at least have plans in place, and they need to be included in their district improvement plans and the student handbooks. So since the districts are already required to be thinking about these things anyway, I think it's a great opportunity for LSSPs and others to, approach their leadership and say, hey, these are some great things, like Sharon said, that we're already doing that help us to, have these plans in place. But then also, here are some other things that we could do, and then pulling in the data, pulling in the examples. I also think too, so again, I'm the person on the panel who is not an education expert. I'm coming more from the policy, arena. However, I have the benefit of meeting and talking with a lot of amazing people like the ones that are on this panel and that I'm sure are in the audience. And often what I'm hearing too is if you can identify another campus who's shown success. So it's like looking at, some of the folks that we've heard about from today, or that you're aware of that are showing good results, and then having that sort of that peer-to-peer, if you can get principal to talk to principal, superintendent to superintendent, that really seems to make a difference or what really brings some energy and momentum for these initiatives, based on what I'm hearing from folks. So again, I think it's just think about how these things can help campus, your teachers, your principals, your other administrators, on how it helps them achieve their goals. And then I think you'll start seeing some of that buy-in.
Thank you so much, Josette. And I appreciate that policy role that you play. It's really important to have policy married with the work that is happening in our school district. So thank you for that perspective and being part of the conversation. So our time is really drawing to a close. We could really talk about this probably for the rest of the day. There's so many, it's such a rich topic and it's such an important topic. So as we turn to close, I am going to ask each of our panelists with respect to our final thoughts. As our time ends, what is the one word that you want to leave with our participants as it relates to equity solutions through SEL? And I'm going to actually ask Amy to kick us off. What's the
Absolutely.
one word?
Well, I just thank everybody for their time today. The thing I would like to encourage to leave you with is just think about who is in your circle of influence. You don't have to convince everyone you know. You just need to convince the handful of people that have influence on others. And as we were just talking about before, if you can get that principal to buy in, you're golden. And so hone in and just keep the conversations fresh and relevant. And I just am so thankful for the work that you guys do. Principals would not be successful without you. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Josette, your one word that you want to leave our participants and those that tuned in this morning with.
Say is just keep going. Keep
Love
going.
it.
Even in the face of adversity, even in the face of barriers and challenges, keep going.
Okay, thank you. Rachelle.
I would say, we've talked a lot about principal input, and I think don't be afraid to start the conversation in whatever that looks like. Like Amy said, with whoever that is. You have the ability to enact change just in being an LSSP on your campus and being in that position, but you have to start the conversation. And so just keep going like Josette. Then if you try one time and it doesn't work, you've got to try again. And it might be numerous conversations to really look at the data and say, I really think this is what's going to be best for our campus or for our district. But you've got to start with that one bite and just
All
try.
right, thank you. And Anne, what's your one word you want to leave those that are tuning in with this?
I think my one word right now is excited. There are just so many opportunities for us right now to make a real impact with social emotional learning and these interventions for kids. And I'm just so excited to see everything unfold and watch it happen. It's going to be so fun.
All right, thank you, Anne. Sharon.
I guess my one word would be essential. This is essential work.
All right, thank you. And Donna.
And you know, Angela, that I don't do one word.
I know, and that's why I said, I'm going to challenge you here today on a Friday morning.
I do want to say, though, is I want to thank all the panelists today. They were kind of voluntold that they were doing this today. And so I am so appreciative of every one of them. What an awesome group to have as part of the SEL for Texas group. And if you think this group is awesome, wait till you see the rest of us. We have more to come. And if you want to be a part of our organization, please join us.
Okay.
selfortexas.org.
All right, and I'm going to ask someone to put SEL for Texas into the chat so that the participants will be able to reach out and to join us. I want to thank, again, TASP for providing this opportunity for us to speak with you about this very important topic. As you can tell from this dynamic group of women, we're passionate about this. I see how SEL can work for us, not only in our classrooms, but as I'm working with kids that I'm serving as their lawyers, and also when they come before me with juvenile cases in my courtroom. So it can really make a difference. So my one word for you is opportunity. I want you to seize on this opportunity and to go back into your school districts on fire, knowing that you're going to have the tools that you need to really impact and to change the conversation for the young people. So thank you so much again, and I'm going to turn it back over to Nancy.
Mary suggested I have a beach background, so that's why you see the beach background. I think this is great, so I'm taking her up on the suggestion. So I am going to echo Donna's commentary about this panel. Thank you for all of your work. This was an amazing way to start today, and I'm very, very grateful to all of you. We had a message on the chat saying, thanks, Nancy, and it's not me, it's you all. So thank you for accepting being voluntold. We're very excited. I think you all had a great message for us to let us know that this is possible. This isn't something that's just theoretical and is out there. This is very, very possible. I just want to remind everybody that on our handouts website, we do have all of your contact information. So if they need to get a hold of any of you, your contact information has been put on the website under handouts for this session, as well as the description of what SEL for Texas is all about.